first of all, thank you to UBRI, and in particular to Lauren, for organizing another successful and wonderful event. This is becoming a little bit of a tradition, but also an opportunity for us as researchers to have a room full of developer, researcher, and practitioner to really connect research to what we do, essentially. Research, however, in part because we heard them many times yesterday and today, the potential of this technology is not realized yet. We still need to build that evidence. And to build that evidence, we really are kind of at times struggling a little bit because research takes a little bit more time, but also can this technology work? In particular, can it work, I think Ken was mentioning early, for the underbanked, the underserved, the vulnerable, the traditionally excluded. So I'm going to ask you very quickly to introduce yourself. And kind of tell me a little bit about how you work on blockchain. What is your, if you want to yap, and your shortcoming of blockchain in this space in your research, and your thoughts on, I guess, in this first few years of blockchain research. Maisha, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Maisha Williams, and again, I'm vice chair at Spelman College. It's a small liberal arts college, HBCU, in Atlanta, Georgia. And I've currently worked on research through the Morgan State FinTech Center to look at wealth disparities and cryptocurrency in the pandemic, as well as slightly prior to it. And I've been able to contribute that this is the opportunity for us to think about cryptocurrency in such a way that it will maybe allow us to improve the wealth disparities around the world. So that's pretty much what I do.
Russia?
So, hello everybody, my name is Russia. It's pronounced like the country. I'm not from Russia. And I can promise you I have no connections to Kremlin. I'm actually a finance professor. Kind of, you can consider me one of these bad guys. However, I'm trying to use the skills and understanding of the financial markets and blockchain technologies in the developing world, and how to use these technologies actually to help parts of the world where financial institutions are missing to develop further. And actually, you know, gentleman in the front row, we are working together. He is a colleague of mine from New York University, Yao. Together with him, we have been working extensively on projects in Ghana and use of blockchain technology for financial inclusion.
Henry?
So my name is Henry Kim. I run the blockchain lab, and I started actually quite early because, as you said, one of the best places for blockchain in the world is Toronto. So I started my lab in 2016 with a postdoc and a bunch of other people. So we've done many different projects. I've actually helped out with different cryptocurrency companies, blockchain companies. But how I got into this, why I'm sitting here, is about a year ago I was asked the International Telecommunications Union, which is like ISO, and they set standards, technical standards. And they actually have a financial inclusion group and blockchain group. And I was asked to join as an academic on this. And so we did some research. And I'll talk more about that today, but that's how I got into financial inclusion. So just so that you know, I do not have the expertise of these folks that have been doing it for a long time. I'm about a year into it. So please, that's my caveat for whatever I say.
So let me try to push all of you a little bit more. You've been very polite until now. But let me actually really, if you think about it, the vulnerable, and they can be defined as traditionally excluded, whether it's like traditionally excluded from the financial system, particularly in the US, seems to be color and race, or migrants seems to be the case in kind of developed country. In developing country becomes people that traditionally don't have even a bank account, even ID dimension are kind of non-existent. So again, if you think about blockchain, a blockchain solution in general, where do you feel like in the context of financial inclusion, where do you think blockchain has met the hype, and where is that has fallen short right now in terms of evidence and potential? Sorry. Aaron?
All of you first.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about this. Through my research, what I found is that there are, so in this group that I'm in with the ITU, there are stablecoin companies, IMF, Amazon as well. And they're very user-focused. What they ultimately wanted to do was they wanted to find a technical spec for protocols or UI for financial inclusion, right? So all these companies have their use cases. When I investigated further, here's the thing about those use cases. I would say broadly they fall under 3 classes. One is where you read this about Ukraine or Vanuatu. These are NGOs doing cash and voucher disbursement. The issue with that's sort of one-off. You have to have a humanitarian issue, and also NGOs get heavily involved. The second use of cryptocurrencies and stablecoins for financial inclusion is remittance. But many of the things like World Economic Forum, MIT's Digital Currency Initiative, when they investigated that, they found that for remittance, for the most part, it's not cost effective. There are much better options of doing, much better ways of doing remittance than using stables and cryptocurrencies. And third is what people currently use Bitcoin for. So in places like Nigeria, where you have hyperinflation, where you have government policies that take away store of value, so places like Nigeria, places like China currently, other places, people use it as their better store of value than their current financial systems. The issue with all 3, and this is my point, and this is what my research, is that none of those are scalable, and that's the issue, right? CVA by NGOs, that's one-off, and what happens there is the NGOs take up the bulk of the work because the infrastructure for this doesn't exist. For things like what Nigerian citizens are doing, they're running counter to what government regulations are, so you can't scale up because the government will block that, right? And the third, as I said, for remittance, the issue there, and this is the underlying issue of everything that I found, is that the fundamental issue of stablecoins and crypto, fundamental issue of financial inclusion is not a technical issue. It's not about user interface. It's not about protocols. It's about what Nurullah and MIT Digital Currency Initiative says is an intermediary ecosystem. In the priority of things that must exist before you could use stables and cryptocurrencies, there are many, many other things, like, for instance, in the global south, does the electricity run? Do you have a vendor that will take anything other than cash? So, I'm sorry, I probably want to pass my allotment, but the long and short of it simply is that this is not a crypto problem. This is a social political problem. Crypto can help, but many other things to be in place before crypto and stablecoins can.
I'm going to come back on this point, but I'm not going to take away time from Russia and Maisha.
Let me first tie into what he has said, and it's, I would say, very much related to your question. We have heard a lot of people here talking about the trust and importance of blockchain to maintain the trust and establish a trust in the economy. I would first try to challenge this idea, because actually, let me give you one anecdote. Doing this field work, as you have rightly said, to establishing a blockchain working economy, you need lots of infrastructure in the field. You need to educate people how to use a certain application. You need to introduce exchange offices to be able to convert and accept this money. One of the things that we have done, we have actually tried to introduce our own currency that would allow people in the field, and we are talking about the poorest of the poorest in Ghana, to buy certain agricultural products that they need for farming, tractor services, etc. However, you need to enable this. It's not about only building technology. Blockchain technology did allow us to relatively quickly build an app that would allow for these transactions. And blockchain technology does basically one thing. It allows for tracking that there is no double spending. Everything else is not really related to blockchain technology, but very, very difficult field work, which tends to be very, very, very expensive, because you need to have people running around and talking to other people, showing them how to use it, introducing exchange offices, etc., 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 and building trust. And now let me give you one anecdote. In order to be able to do these kind of things, we have been applying for one large grant that would enable us actually to finance these in-field operations. And we call this project Crypto in the Bush. because we are literally deploying crypto in the bush in the Ghana. The comment that we have received is, can you remove the word crypto because it doesn't give confidence? Even though it's not, I mean, it effectively is a cryptocurrency because we have basically developed it, but it has nothing to do with, I don't know, all the scams, illegal trade that has happened and things related to that. But we shouldn't take as granted that crypto and cryptography in general carries the trust. I do explain, we can try to explain people in the bush or even educated people that are doing the review of these project applications on the superiority of digital cryptography and I don't know what. But it doesn't mean that it actually carries trust among these people. And we should do a much, much, much better job in communicating this. And at the end, we actually have to change the name of the project in this grant application because this was considered as a killer, as a showstopper, basically to have the name, the crypto in the bush. And I personally love the name, but at the end, the name was gone.
Maisha?
I think one of the things that makes people excited about cryptocurrency, and particularly for traditionally marginalized groups within a particular economy or even less developed countries, is its decentralized structure. And that can, in most people's minds, I think, get around some of the institutional issues that you have to deal with from government mandates or from things being so central within a particular economy. Initially, when we were first learning about cryptocurrency, one of the things that we knew is that the ledger itself was anonymous, right? And so the anonymity brings an element that makes it feel like, oh, if I'm a particular marginalized group, or even from the standpoint of a particular country, those groups can have more hope that they can change the landscape of wealth distribution as it's been for so many centuries. And so I think that's what makes it hopeful. Now, on the reverse side, I think we still have to think about what we want cryptocurrency to be. Is it an asset or will it be a fundraising type thing, right? And so I think those are the things that we have to think about moving forward in the cryptocurrency space.
Absolutely. So let me actually come back a little bit to this element of trust and scalability. So while we see a lot of success, in particular in developing country in kind of underserved community, is this boutique, I call it boutique pilots. Are these 100 people at most pilot, they work, they build community, there is kind of community currency, remittances experience, where some of my work is pushing me, and what we are trying to do is very much the scale. So can this work for 5,000 people? Can this work in collaboration with government? It's not just the one-off payment for disaster relief, but can this be the normal for disaster relief? I was talking yesterday, for instance, PPP or other kind of FEMA disbursement, including in the US. The moment there is a disaster, how we push money there becomes an issue of identity, bank account, or banks. For instance, Ukraine was shut down. In the context where I work in Africa and developing country, the bank may not be available. Refugees right now is becoming unfortunately normalized and becoming permanent states. They may not have access to bank accounts. So now we are facing a little bit, to me, I'm actually remaining a little bit more hopeful about this scale, but there are kind of important, and I take this opportunity to be in this room to make this call. We, at least in my work, I've been facing with KYC that doesn't work for refugees. If I need to have an IDs and I'm a refugee and I don't have that original IDs, I cannot send back remittance. I cannot open that stable wallet. User interface, Rasha was mentioning education. Somebody said if it doesn't look like Venmo, it doesn't work. In part because I have to have the confidence to go, I can open an account exactly as I do with mobile money. I don't need to know the technology that is behind it. I don't need to know that it's on a chain. I need to know that it's safe, it's private, and is actually reliable. Those are elements of trust, but now we are you have researchers that all of a sudden we are faced with kind of setting up this large-scale RCT or field experiment is like, oh, this may not work. This is going to actually reduce confidence. Again, I was working in a study in Kenya, and this notion that, again, one Kenyan shilling is not one Kenyan shilling, but can be traded, and it's kind of very unsettling because then they don't have trust in the value of their money. It's too volatile. So again, I'm asking you as well, what is your experience, or what is your call, if you want, to a developer, to those people that are actually in charge of kind of designing this product? How do we incorporate this, well, in the point of view of the vulnerable, the ones that are excluded? How we can make sure that this works at scale? And then a little bit of a selfish kind of question of me and my research is this notion of identity. Again, do we want identity to be just a complement? Is it a necessary complement, or is just something nice to have? So again, now that we have potentially the idea of kind of identity on blockchain, how they complement with financial inclusion solution. Rasha, and then we're going to
so let me start by saying that, touching one point that you have mentioned, which is user interface. I think that we should do a much better job in simplifying and making the applications that are being provided out there as simple as possible. And not everybody understands what's a public key, what's a private key. They shouldn't. If one should understand what the public key and what the private key is, there is something wrong with a particular application. That's comment number one. Comment number two, when it comes to identities and understanding the system in which you are working, we first have to make sure that the basics are set right. And when I say basics, I would say internet is usually not even a problem, but sometimes charging a phone is. And making sure that actually people have electricity to charge phones is something that we should not take as granted. Even before this particular project where we have encountered this issue, I have worked previously for UNICEF on one large project where they were donating computers to elementary schools. But it turned out
the show don't work, doesn't work.
but they donated it to schools that didn't have electricity, and then where do we end with these kind of donations? And similar thing is with financial inclusion. We can say banking systems do not exist. Sure, yeah, but there is also issue of electricity. We shouldn't live in this bubble that everybody has electricity and that this is given. And it reminds me on one podium discussion where, post-COVID, consultants from large consulting firms, not to mention names, were discussing the future of the office without realizing that 90% of people, anyhow, even before epidemics, did not have an office. So, this is a problem for a very, very small part of the population to start with. And I think,
Can I push back a little bit on? And I understand the difficulty of infrastructure in developing country, but at the same time, you have the success of mobile money that is kind of rooted in mobile phone, that some of them are becoming also kind of smartphone. But the point is, like, electricity was never the constraint for mobile money. So what is the made mobile money, and I understand that it's a different infrastructure, work is clearly not an electricity part, but for me it was the simplicity. And again, in particular in Africa, and this is the trade-off between Latin America and Africa, there was no other way of doing banking, at least widespread in that context. And so that filled the hole. That hole is still there, but clearly is not kind of bricks and mortar in traditional banking. So just...
No, I agree with you, and especially when you look at the success of ePensa, but when we are talking about, the success of ePensa, you have to also take into account that you could do it using the phones that would need to be charged like once every 2 weeks. These are not smartphones that need to be charged twice a day. And I think that, what would be a good step forward for the developing countries as well is that developers of these smartphone products could actually successfully develop phones that can keep the charge for much, much longer times than they are currently doing it. But, you know, as in the previous panel discussion was mentioned, in the world where companies developing these kind of products are driven by profits, it's not so easy to make profits on such products. And this is the key reason why we do not have smartphones that need to be charged every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, or even every month, like we used to have before.
Oh, can I come to
Yes.
Maisha first?
Yeah, because I had a reaction to your pushback, and I want to push back. And so one of the things I was thinking about while you were speaking is this idea of mobile money in African countries. I know I've had the chance to visit Nigeria on a couple of occasions. And while Uber, or its counterpart, is there, it's still the case that you call an Uber from your phone and then pay cash once you get to the Uber. So it's not really as widespread in terms of mobile money as you would think, and there are workarounds, if you will. Even to the extent of individuals having electricity, that's also a disparity issue, right? Because it really depends on whether the household pays for consistent electricity. Sometimes they don't care. And then sometimes a household may have a generator, in which case they have to be able to afford the generator. And so, in thinking about mobile money and how widely available it is widely available. I think I'd say in quotation marks, but not in the way that we think.
I think it's over. Okay.
Yeah.
It's not my panel.
Yeah.
So I want to make 2 points.
Yeah.
So I love the fact you brought up mobile money, because I think mobile money should be the smoking gun that we would hope eventually that crypto and stable coins could be, right? We're not there. I mean, Gates Foundation concluded mobile money does affect financial inclusion. The World Economic Council concluded stable coins do not, right? That's where we are right now. But the thing is that that's a lot of things are going to have to take in place. The infrastructure is going to have to be built. You're going to have wider adoption of digital money, CBDCs. But I love what you did, because at the end of the day, me and you as researchers, we have to do design in the small. What I mean by that is that we're not going to, this one experiment, even if it's 5,000 subjects, is not in of itself going to change the world. But we have to do that because when the context of the world changes, when regulations change, and when it's fruitful for these types of innovations to be implemented, then we want to be there, right? So I think I think mobile money is the hope that we can have something like mobile money in the crypto and stablecoin world. And two, but we need to be aware of the context, right? Which is what we're talking about. You can, I guess one of the things, or literally one of my frustrations, I have a bit of a duke it out with the folks at the ITU, was that, look, despite what you believe, this isn't something that's scalable. This isn't something that's done on the wide scale. So please understand the context. Please understand the limitations, but don't stop, because we have to advance forward. But recognize that you always have to keep strategy and the world in large in juxtaposed to what you're doing research in the small. And that sort of is, I think, how we stop the argument. Do what you can, but don't delude yourself and don't tell a false narrative that this is something that is ready to change the world, because it is not.
So, and I think I completely agree on the readiness part, but also I think I probably am a little bit more optimistic. And again, like you, I travel and I worked for the past 10 years in developing country. And again, if you go to Kenya, again, I actually also was in Nigeria. Most of what we are doing right now in intervention for digital skills for business. We saw, ironically, COVID had many negative impact, but kind of pushed most of the business, small business, 1 or 2 or 3 people business, even to open E&S commerce. So this notion of kind of slow move towards a digital economy, an economy that is dealing from just being cash. Again, if I sell something and it's not like Amazon of Facebook, but it's actually WhatsApp. They sell kind of the e-commerce is very much a social media commerce. At that point, I need to have an infrastructure that allow me to have that payment. The payment has to be safe. We are not there. That's where I think all of us see the potential. What is needed for us to get there? And you guys.
I was going to be very. One of the things that I found in my research I think was really interesting is that when I looked at the World Economic Forum's use cases, it was over and over, it was mentions of lending circles, so tandas, suzus, in Korea that would be okay. And so one of the things I thought would be interesting is Circle actually has this. They actually have philanthropy programs. So one of the things I'd like to see that I haven't seen is support for community-based organizations. We all really rely on NGOs, but what happens when the NGOs leave? So it would be nice, for instance, to digitize and do kind of what they did with kind of support that they provided in Bangladesh to the lending circles. I'd love to see more of that. I think my final point is that we have things that are happening. We have CBDCs in many parts of the world. We have digital identity, even a Global South solution have digital identity solutions. So there are little pieces of technological pieces being floating around. So I think it would just again, like the mobile money thing, maybe we'll have this serendipitous aha, maybe 4 or 5 years due to the kind of work that you're doing. But it'd be nice to understand that lots of pieces have to be put in place, right? And if you understand that, then you don't come with the hubris, here's a tech solution that's going to work. If you don't do that, and if you sort of understand the holistic perspective, I think we're much going to be more hopeful.
Rasha?
I mean, I think that it boils down at the end to the lack of trust. And I think that the lack of trust is the main thing that is prohibiting or stopping the further growth and building up.
Can I ask you, and I'm actually, there was the pre and the post blockchain winter or crypto winter, whatever. We are still in the previous winter. But I completely agree. There is now, when you talk to government counterpart and there is blockchain or the crypto world, there is like, I don't want a Bitcoin. And I understand that cryptocurrency are not Bitcoin or blockchain is not. So is the trust, the lack on that kind of, is the trust, the lack of trust that was emanated from all the scandals? Or is more general, and I see these more all the times, including the adoption of bank accounts, is a lack of trust. I had people in one of my experiments, the only times they were using the bank account to make sure the money was there. So we all work in low trust environment. When you define trust, what is the trust? Is the trust because it's blockchain, or is it trust in a new technology? And then what can we do in either way to actually push that forward?
This is a very good question, but also a difficult one to answer. But let me try. I sometimes feel that we as humans have in our lizard brains some kind of a need for an authority that will guarantee and vouch for this trust. Where this comes from, I'm not sure, but I don't see this decentralized idea of trust being picked up enough. Whether this will be picked up by central bankers, like we have heard in the previous discussion with CBDCs. But first of all, we shouldn't live in illusion that people are honest and through joint collaboration everything is just gonna work and everybody's gonna behave honest. If we assume that there is dishonesty and misbehavior among the top and leading financial institutions, we shouldn't live in illusion that we will not observe the same thing among the poorest of the poorest. I mean, we have seen that. You really need to keep an open eye not to be cheated when it comes to giving credit, when it comes to whether somebody has a farm or doesn't have a farm and claims that it has a farm, etc., etc. So, and we should not assign magical properties to blockchain itself. And I think that this also helps to the creation of the lack of trust. Blockchain is a technology that is there to help us make clearing settlement and stop double spending. And this is a fantastic technology which allowed two of us as academics to develop an app that will allow this process very, very, very quickly and cheaply. But this will not help us with implementing this in a field where people need to be sent, and this turns out to be very expensive. Talk to, educated, and then once people have went through, 1, 2, 3 seasons of farming, when they have received the loans, these loans have led to creation of profits, this is how you build trust. And building trust takes time. Building trust does not take overnight.
Maisha, I'm gonna ask for an extra minute because Maisha, take the last couple of minutes of you.
I think that in order to move forward for the global economy and the crypto space, it's going to be important to, one, teach people about cryptocurrency. I mean, for the most part, people only know what they know about the early versions of cryptocurrency, the very early versions, and what they know can be faulty. Another issue is getting around the isms, whether it be racism, whether it be sexism, whether it be nepotism. And in developing countries, like some African countries, some cases you can observe some tribal things that make some tribes wealthier, some not as wealthy, which looks just like racism in the United States. And so we have to think through these things because when the consumers start to trust the product and they're able to get away from some of the things that we see, like we make judgments on people about their willingness to trust them, whether or not we can expect credibility from them based off of what we see, right? And so that's going to help us move forward in this space.
Perfect. And we are at time. Sorry, Lauren, we went a little bit over. That's my fault. Thank you, everybody. It's been a fantastic discussion, and I just want to thank everybody again.